The waiting area at Gate 47 buzzed with the usual airport anxiety delayed flights, bored children, impatient businessmen tapping on tablets, and the smell of stale coffee wafting from the terminal cafe. But seated in the corner near the window, far from the noise and the crowd, was a woman who drew quiet, uneasy glances. She wore a faded army hoodie, the kind issued years ago, sleeves pulled down low despite the summer heat. A well-worn baseball cap shadowed her face, but it couldn't hide the visible scars that crept down the side of her neck and onto her hands. They weren't small, these were the kind of scars that came from fire, deep trauma, something violent. And final. Even from a distance, people noticed. And some stared. A group of teenagers, loud and bored, sat nearby playing games on their phones. One of the boys, lanky and red-headed, whispered something to his friend and motioned toward the woman. The other laughed and replied just loudly enough for a few heads to turn. "Dude, it looks like she got into a fight with a blowtorch and lost." The woman didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Much worse. She shifted her seat slightly and clutched the strap of a small military-issued duffel bag resting between her feet. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from anger or fear, but habit. A tic she couldn't quite shed, even years later. A man in his 70s sitting next to her glanced over and offered a kind smile. He wore a Navy cap from Vietnam and leaned slightly toward her, speaking in a soft voice. "Ignore them. Kids don't know a damn thing about what courage looks like." She nodded slowly. Still, she didn't speak. Across the gate, a mother pulled her daughter closer as they passed. The little girl looked up at the scarred woman, eyes wide, and asked loudly, "Mommy, what happened to her face?" The mother didn't answer. The woman looked out the terminal window, eyes fixed on the runway. She didn't seem angry. If anything, she looked tired. But beneath the fatigue was something else. Something most people couldn't name. Something calm. Still. Heavy. The gate agent's voice crackled through the speakers. "Attention passengers of Flight 228 to Washington, D.C. We're currently experiencing a mechanical delay. Estimated boarding will begin in 45 minutes. We apologize for the inconvenience." Groans filled the terminal. Phones lit up. People grumbled. Some stood to stretch. The woman didn't move. Then, as she bent to adjust her duffel bag, a folder slipped from the side pocket and landed on the floor with a soft thud. A photograph spilled out. A young woman in uniform, standing beside a Black Hawk helicopter. Her face smooth, strong, smiling was unmistakably hers. The same teenagers who mocked her earlier noticed the picture. "Wait, is that her?" One sighed, louder than he meant to. The old Navy vet beside her saw it too, and something else. The edge of a tattoo on her forearm, just barely peeking from under her sleeve. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer. The tattoo was familiar. Military. But not just any ink. It was a Special Forces insignia. Rare, quiet. The kind only seen on soldiers who'd been deep in it. "Where'd you get that?" he asked her carefully, pointing to the tattoo. She didn't answer. Suddenly, the air shifted. People looked up. A wave of murmuring spread through the gate as a small entourage entered the terminal suits, military dress, and one tall man walking deliberately in front. A 5-star general. The teens gasped. "That's General Matheson," one whispered. "From the news. Dude's like a legend." The general looked around the gate, scanning the crowd, ignoring the attention. His eyes moved past families, businessmen, and flight attendants. And then they stopped, right on the scarred woman sitting by the window. His face changed. He walked toward her, and the entire terminal went silent. Asterisk. The silence that followed was eerie. A 5-star general rarely walked through civilian terminals, especially not alone. and certainly not like this. Every eye followed him as he made his way across the carpeted floor, his polished boots clicking in slow, steady rhythm. General William Matheson was the kind of man you didn't forget. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the stoic presence of someone who had stood at both funerals and war councils. His chest bore a dozen ribbons, each one earned in places most Americans couldn't pronounce. Even in a world of politics and ceremony, Matheson was known as a soldier's general. And now, here he was, walking toward her. The scarred woman sat still, eyes wide but unblinking. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her duffel. The old Navy vet beside her straightened his spine instinctively, sensing something historic. Teenage boys who had mocked her were suddenly quiet. One of them dropped his phone as General Matheson approached. His pace slowed. His expression shifted, no longer neutral, but reverent, even tender. A few feet from her, he stopped completely. His eyes dropped briefly to the tattoo peeking out from her sleeve. He swallowed. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, in front of hundreds of strangers, the general straightened his shoulders and brought his right hand up in a crisp, formal salute. Gasps echoed around the gate. People fumbled with their phones, raising cameras, unsure if they were witnessing a private moment or something worthy of history books. The woman hesitated. Her lips parted. Her hands, still trembling slightly, released the duffel and rose slowly. She returned the salute flawlessly. A perfect military gesture drilled into her bones years ago. "Captain Reyes," the general said, voice low, firm. She blinked. Her lips quivered. "Sir," she replied, barely audible. "You're alive," he said. "I am, sir," she whispered. His eyes glistened. "They told us you didn't make it." "I almost didn't," she replied. Around them, people stared. Murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "Captain Reyes? Is that the one from Kandahar?" Another said, "I thought she died, ... General Matheson turned to the small crowd forming nearby. His voice carried now deeper, stronger. "This woman is a hero. She dragged 4 Marines out of a burning chopper under enemy fire. She refused evacuation until the last man was safe. We thought she was gone. She vanished after her discharge classified. But she saved my son's life." The terminal went silent again. Captain Reyes lowered her salute, but her posture remained straight, military precise. The general took a step forward. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. He embraced her gently, mindful of her injuries. "I didn't come here for this," she whispered, pulling back. "I know," he said softly. "But sometimes the world needs to remember what real valor looks like." She looked around. Dozens of eyes were on her, phones filming, strangers watching. The same people who had whispered cruel things moments ago now looked at her with reverence, even shame. The red-headed teen who mocked her earlier stood frozen. His hands hung limp at his sides, face pale. His friends shuffled uncomfortably. Unsure of what to say, the general turned back to her. "You're the reason 4 families didn't bury their sons." Captain Reyes looked away, swallowing hard. "They were the reason I didn't quit," Matheson nodded. "Still carrying others." "I see." The old Navy vet wiped a tear from his eye. People nearby began clapping, slowly at first 1 or 2 uncertain hands. Then more. Louder. Soon the entire terminal was applauding. She shook her head gently, embarrassed. "Please, I don't want this." The general raised a hand. The clapping stopped immediately. "She's not here for a parade," he said. "She's here to go home." And just like that, the crowd parted. No one stopped her. No one mocked her again. But they would never forget her. The weight of silence hung heavily over Gate 47. Even the gate agent, mid-sentence in a boarding announcement, stopped speaking when he caught sight of General Matheson. It wasn't every day that a legend walked through the terminal, especially not a five-star general with a security detail trailing behind him like ghosts. But it was how he moved that made the moment unforgettable, not toward any official escort, not to the first-class lounge, not to media waiting near baggage claim. He walked with clear intent, eyes fixed on one person. Captain Reyes hadn't moved since she returned the salute. Her body was upright, but her eyes betrayed the flood of emotion she was holding back. This was not how she had planned her return. She had boarded dozens of flights over the last few years, all without incident. This time had been no different until him. She had not seen General Matheson since the rescue. Back then, he was just another uniform standing at the field hospital's edge, staring at his son, the final survivor Reyes had pulled from the crash. The last time she saw his face, she was bandaged beyond recognition and numb from morphine. He had tried to thank her, but she hadn't been able to speak. And now, years later, he stood before her again, not with cameras or speeches, but with reverence. Matheson gestured toward a nearby private lounge. "Come with me," he said gently. Reyes hesitated, then followed without a word. The Navy veteran beside her stood up and saluted her as she passed. She returned it quietly. Even the teens who had mocked her shrank back, uncertain whether to apologize or vanish into the floor dot. She passed them without a glance. Inside the lounge, the sounds of the terminal faded behind the glass. A few of Matheson's aides began to enter, but he raised his hand. "Just us." They obeyed without question. Captain Reyes sat slowly in the leather chair, placing her duffel carefully at her feet. The general didn't sit at first. He looked at her like a man studying a ghost. "I don't believe this," he finally said. "We searched for you for months." "I didn't want to be found," she said. His eyes narrowed with concern. "Why?" Her hands tightened on the chair's arms. "Because every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the ones I couldn't save." Matheson finally sat across from her. "You saved 4 Marines. One of them was my son. That's not failure. That's heroism." She shook her head. The chopper exploded. The fire was everywhere. "I had to choose. I couldn't carry them all." "You shouldn't have carried any," he replied gently. "You were on fire, Reyes, and you still went back for them." She looked away. The wall clock ticked too loud. "No one needed to remember me." "I did," Matheson said. "Those families did. They still do." Silence stretched. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photo, the same one she had dropped at the gate. "My son keeps this in his office." "Did you know that?" Her breath caught. "He says every day he feels unworthy. Because the bravest person he ever knew refused to let herself be seen." She stared at the photo. "I didn't come here to be seen." "I know," Matheson said, placing it gently on the table between them. "But maybe it's time someone stood up for you. Just once." She stared at the image herself in full uniform, face still untouched by flames, standing next to the very Black Hawk that nearly killed her. "I don't want medals," she whispered. "I'm not offering one," he replied. "Just truth." Back. At gate 47, the lounge's glass wall allowed the passengers a full view of what was happening inside. Dozens of faces watched as the scarred woman and the legendary general sat together. Conversations buzzed with speculation. "That's her. It has to be her." Someone whispered. The teenage boys who had mocked her earlier were now rooted to their seats, pale-faced and ashamed. One of them, the redhead who had made the blowtorch joke, could hardly meet anyone's gaze. His fingers nervously tapped on his phone, but he couldn't take his eyes off the woman. Inside the lounge, Reyes sat with quiet strength. Her scars, though raw and visible, no longer looked like something tragic. In the company of a 5-star general saluting her, speaking her name, they looked like medals in their own right. earned into her skin by fire and sacrifice. Matheson leaned forward. You know why I came here today? He asked. Reyes shook her head. I was supposed to be attending a military gala in Washington, he said. But I rerouted when I heard your name flagged on a no assistance boarding list. No special care, no priority, no wheelchair request. Just traveling. Reyes shifted uncomfortably. I didn't want anyone to know. Matheson nodded. Well, I needed to. I've spent years shaking hands with politicians and wearing dress uniforms at ceremonies. But none of those people carried 4 Marines on their back through a firefight while on fire. Her voice caught. I didn't carry 4. I carried 3. I laughed the 4th. No, Matheson said firmly. That 4th made it home because of you. You collapsed after dragging him to cover. You passed out on fire. That's why he lived. She looked down, face shadowed beneath her cap. I only remember pieces, she said softly. The heat, screaming, then black. He nodded. Sometimes that's all there is. After a long pause, Reyes looked up. Why now? Because the world needs to see what a real hero looks like, he said. And because those boys out there mocked you. They don't know what you've done. But they should. Reyes swallowed hard, the tension in her jaw tight. If I go out there, I'll be just a scarred woman again, not a captain. Not a pilot, just a freak. Matheson stood slowly. Not if I go first. Before she could stop him, he opened the lounge door and stepped out. The terminal quieted again. The general stood tall, eyes scanning the crowd. Then, deliberately, he turned back to her, just as she stepped out of the lounge. She paused at the threshold, shoulders squared. Without hesitation, Matheson raised his hand and gave her a full, crisp salute. Every eye was on her. Every phone. Camera pointed. But none of that mattered. Reyes stepped forward and returned the salute sharp. Perfect. Military. Whispers became stunned silence. Then, Matheson turned toward the crowd. This is Captain Isabella Reyes. She saved 4 lives during the Kandahar extraction. While on fire, she is the reason my son is alive today. Mouths opened, but no one spoke. People were too stunned that the red-headed teen dropped his gaze. His cheeks burned. The woman everyone had ignored, pitied, or mocked, now stood tall beside. The most decorated living general in the country. Reyes didn't smile. She didn't bask in it. She simply stood with dignity, her scars shining in the terminal light like ribbons of battle. A small girl nearby whispered to her mother, She looks like a superhero. And for the first time in years, Captain Reyes allowed herself to believe it, even just a little. The hush at Gate 47 didn't lift for several minutes after General Matheson's words. Some passengers slowly returned to their seats, whispering to one another, replaying what they had seen. Others stayed standing, unable to stop staring at Captain Reyes, who now sat silently once more, eyes fixed out the window as if nothing had happened. But something had. For the first time in years, someone had said her name aloud. Not in a debriefing, not in a casualty report, not in a classified file locked behind a DoD firewall, but in public, in front of witnesses. Captain Isabella Reyes, a name many had forgotten, a name many had never heard, but within certain military circles, Reyes had been a ghost of legend. The whispers were always the same. A female pilot shot down behind enemy lines, who rescued her entire crew while mortally wounded, then vanished. No press conference, no military ceremony, just gone. But the truth was more brutal than the whispers. It was May 3rd, 2015, outside Kandahar. Reyes had been piloting a medevac Black Hawk Calcine Echo 9 sent to extract a Marine platoon trapped under heavy insurgent fire. A simple pickup, they were told. But nothing about that day was simple. As Reyes approached the drop zone, her chopper took a direct hit from an RPG. The tail rotor was severed. She kept the bird steady, just long enough to land it, semi-controlled before the second explosion took out the left engine. The crash didn't kill her. The fire almost did. Fuel ignited. Flames tore through the cockpit, engulfing her arms and part of her face. Her co-pilot was killed instantly. The crew chief was unconscious. The gunner screamed, pinned by debris. Through sheer force of will, Reyes unbuckled herself, pulled the gunner free, and dragged him through fire to a clearing. She went back 3 more times. Each time she disappeared into black smoke and screaming metal. And each time she came out, carrying someone. Her uniform burned away in places. Her skin blistered raw. Her hands shredded from dragging bodies through wreckage. The last Marine she tried to save was already gone. That haunted her the most. By the time she collapsed near the tree line, her body was covered in 2nd and 3rd degree burns. Local villagers found her hours later, delirious and half dead. They hid her in a goat shed and tended her with what little supplies they had, risking their lives. For 12 days, she drifted in and out of consciousness, hidden from both insurgents and U.S. drones. When a CIA asset finally retrieved her, Reyes was a ghost, thin, broken, and burned beyond recognition. She refused all media coverage. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. She didn't want to be a headline or a symbol. She just wanted to heal alone. So she disappeared. No medals. No parade. She was quietly discharged under classified medical protocols, given a new identity for privacy. She moved to a quiet town in Idaho, working odd jobs, avoiding mirrors. But the scars wouldn't let her forget. The ones on her body were only part of the pain. It was the silence from those she saved that hurt most. Not that they didn't try. She had changed her contact information, rejected every letter, blocked every call. She told herself it was to protect them. The truth was, she didn't believe she deserved thanks. She only saw the face of the one she couldn't save. Until today. Until General Matheson looked her in the eyes and reminded her that one of those Marines was his son, and that his son named his child Isabella. Captain Reyes sat beside General Matheson again, this time inside the now quiet private lounge. She had wiped her face, pulled her sleeves down again, and zipped up her hoodie. The general remained across from her, still calm, still patient. He knew what not to say as much as what to say. Outside the glass wall, the mood at Gate 47 had shifted. People no longer whispered out of judgment. They whispered out of awe. Reyes broke the silence first. "I didn't come back for anyone to know," she said, voice low. "I know you didn't," Matheson replied. "But sometimes silence is a weight. You've carried it long enough." She glanced at him. "You know what the hardest part was? Not the pain, not even the recovery. It was looking in the mirror every morning and not seeing a soldier. Just scars." Matheson nodded. "Scars are stories your skin refuses to forget." She gave a soft, dry laugh. "That sounds like something a chaplain would say," he smiled. "Probably stole it from one." Reyes leaned back in her seat, staring at the ceiling. "I told myself I was at peace. That disappearing was the only way to move on. But sometimes in the middle of the night, I still wake up to screams that aren't mine." Matheson's voice dropped. "You're not the only one." Silence again. Then he reached into his inside coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He placed it on the table between them, slowly, as though it were something sacred. "What is it?" Reyes asked. "A letter from Corporal Jacob Avery, one of the men you saved." Her eyes narrowed. "He wrote it 5 years ago. Tried to send it dozens of times. You kept refusing all contact." So he mailed it to me, hoping I'd find a way to deliver it one day. I think today is that day. She stared at the envelope, her fingers inches from it. I can't promise it won't hurt. Matheson added. Reyes hesitated, then picked it up. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Captain Reyes, you don't know me well. I was unconscious when you pulled me out of that wreckage. I don't remember your face, but I remember the smell of smoke. I remember the feeling of being lifted. I remember hearing you scream in pain while carrying me. I remember surviving. They say you disappeared, that you didn't want praise, but I named my son after you. His name is Isaiah Reyes Avery. I wanted you to know that someone out there lives because of you, and he's learning what courage means. Reyes's hands were wet when she finished reading. She didn't realize she had started crying. Not silent tears, but deep, shaking sobs. The kind that came from somewhere old and buried. Matheson didn't interrupt. When she finally looked up, her face was red, her eyes swollen. I thought they all moved on, she said. They did, he answered. But not without remembering. You. For a moment, Reyes said nothing. Then, why are you doing this, sir? Because I owe you. Because they owe you. And because maybe it's time people see the face of someone who gave everything and didn't ask for anything back. She shook her head. I still don't want cameras. I don't want attention. Matheson raised a hand. I'm not asking for a press tour. She met his eyes. Then what are you asking for? A quiet honor, he said. Let me give you that one time. Something the boys at that gate and everyone who sees them won't forget. Reyes was silent for a long time. Then she gave the smallest nod. Just one time, she whispered. Once, Matheson confirmed. Outside the lounge, the red-headed teen who had mocked her was still sitting. He saw her through the glass, rose from his chair, and approached the lounge door with uncertainty. He knocked gently. Reyes opened it. The boy's voice cracked. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Reyes looked down at him, not angry, not cold. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Then be better. And walked past. Captain Reyes didn't look back as she exited the private lounge. She moved with the same quiet grace that had carried her through battlefield, smoke and burning wreckage, now through a terminal full of stunned travelers. No security team followed. Her, no press. Only reverence. She sat back in her original seat by the window, duffel bag at her feet. The old Navy veteran beside her gave her a nod, lips tight with emotion. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She gave a slight nod in return. Someone took a photo, not posed, not dramatic. Just Reyes sitting quietly, her scars visible, her eyes fixed outside. In the background, General Matheson stood nearby, hands behind his back, like a sentry guarding something sacred. That photo would explode online within hours. It would be reposted thousands of times across Twitter, Instagram, and news outlets. But by then, Reyes would be gone. She boarded the flight when it was finally called Zone 3, middle seat, no priority, no fanfare. A flight attendant offered to upgrade her after recognizing her. From the scene at the gate, Reyes declined. She sat between two college students who were too stunned to speak. One offered her a water bottle. She smiled, thanked him, and stared out the window for the entire flight. By the time she landed in Washington, D.C., the internet was ablaze with theories. Who is the scarred soldier at Gate 47? 5-star general. Seen saluting mysterious woman. Viral moment sparks nationwide attention. Tattoo linked to elite special forces unit. Identity classified. But the Department of Defense remained silent. No official statements. No confirmations. No interviews. General Matheson refused every request for comment. Within hours, Veterans across the country began sharing similar tattoos on social media, saying, "She represents us." Others posted stories fragments of the woman they had heard about, but had never met. One man, Corporal Jacob Avery, the same Marine who had written, "Reyes, that letter shared a message. I was on that chopper in Kandahar. I never saw her face, but I remember fire, screaming, and someone dragging me through hell. That person saved my life. Today I saw her again, and I couldn't stop crying." The post received millions of views. Soon after, other survivors of the 2015 Kandahar extraction came forward. None had spoken publicly before. They had respected Reyes' silence. But now, they felt the world needed to understand what she had done. One Marine posted a simple image, a handprint burned into the back of a flak jacket, with the caption, "She carried me through fire. I kept this to remember her." Another posted, "They called her dead, but legends don't die. She saved 4 of us," and then vanished. The Department of Veterans Affairs, quietly and without ceremony, added Reyes' name back into their survivor archives, not under the public database, but in the private honors ledger. No rank, no medals, just the name. Isabella Reyes, honor beyond recognition in Idaho, where she had lived in near isolation. Her small apartment remained empty. A neighbor said she'd packed up the night before her flight. Didn't say where she was going, the woman told a local reporter. She just said she was going home. Not sure what that meant. But she left something behind, taped to the inside of her door. No parades, no medals, no interviews. Just remember the ones who never made it back. A single folded American flag rested beneath the note. Back at Gate 47, something began to happen each year on May 3rd. Veterans, strangers, Marines, some in uniform, some in plain clothes, began gathering. No banners, no announcements. Just silence and flowers. They placed them on a specific bench overlooking the tarmac. The one where she had sat that day. No one ever saw her again, but everyone remembered her. Asterisk. No one ever saw Captain Isabella Reyes again, not in the way the world wanted. She didn't return for interviews. She didn't reappear in headlines. She never joined a podcast or attended a veterans gala. It was as if she had vanished again, like smoke from a battlefield wind. But people noticed small things. At the VA hospital in Bethesda, a plain envelope arrived 1 month later. No name, no address, no message, save for a single sentence written in careful, slanted handwriting. "Don't remember me. Remember the ones who didn't come home." Inside, taped gently to a folded page from a combat journal, was a dog tag burned around the edges, but still legible. Isabella Reyes, Capt. Us Army, Opaz, Catholic, the hospital's director. Displayed it quietly in a glass case in the hallway, next to the Medal of Honor recipients' portraits. No press release, no ceremony, just respect. Back at Gate 47, the story didn't fade. Travelers still passed through that terminal every day, unaware of what had taken place there. But once a year on May 3rd, a quiet tradition continued. The first year, only a few veterans came. They sat in silence on the bench where Reyes had once waited. They wore no uniforms, spoke no words. One man placed a folded American flag on the seat, nodded, and walked away. The second year, there were more. A group of Marines flew in from 3 states, arriving together. They left challenge coins, flowers, and a framed photograph of their squad, the one from Kandahar. At the bottom, it read, Echo 9 never forgot. By the 5th year, airport security no longer asked questions. They simply nodded when the Zenzi crowd arrived. Airlines allowed the veterans to gather freely. No one interrupted. No one interfered. It became something sacred. Some people cried, when they read the plaque now mounted on the wall beside the bench. It was small, modest, brushed steel. It read, "In honor of the unnamed soldier once sat here who asked for no thanks, no medals, no legacy. She saved lives and carried scars with silence. She asked us not to remember her. So instead, we remember them all. Gate 47, May 3 RD. No one in the terminal ever saw who placed the plaque. It had just appeared one day, but rumors remained. Pilot once claimed he saw her boarding a red-eye from Anchorage to Denver, who'd pulled low, duffel in hand, scars half concealed. A nurse from a burn clinic in Montana swore she treated a woman with Reyes's injuries under a different name. A child said a scarred woman helped her find her mom in an airport and vanished before they could thank her. The stories were never confirmed, but they kept spreading like embers in dry wind. The girl with the superhero backpack who had once whispered, "She looks like a superhero," returned to Gate 47 as a teenager. She left a letter that read, "You showed me that heroes can be quiet, that strength doesn't always come with a smile. I want to be like you, not famous, just brave." 1 year, a 5-star general returned. Matheson, now retired, stood alone. By the bench, he was older, slower, but still dignified. He placed a single poppy flower beneath the plaque and whispered her name. Then he saluted, just once, and walked away without a word. Years passed. The world moved on, but the legend of Captain Isabella Reyes never faded, because she never asked to be remembered, and in doing so, became unforgettable. Somewhere out there, she still walked alone, unknown, quiet. A soldier without a parade, a hero without a headline. But every May 3rd, as flags were raised and taps played at cemeteries, someone, somewhere, always whispered, "For the ones who came home, and the one who disappeared again."